Jurors reached a guilty verdict in the case of two middle school girls who were killed in Delphi, Indiana.
That jury convicted Richard Allen in the gruesome 2017 double murder of Abby Williams and her best friend Libby German. The bodies of those two teenagers were found a day after they went on a walk in the woods. For more on this case, it gripped that small town for years. We are joined by legal contributor Brian Buckmire and correspondent Alex Perez, who's outside the courthouse there in Delphi. Brian, let's start with you. It took 4 days for jurors to reach a decision. What does that tell you?
So yeah, when it comes to trying to understand a jury, it's always reading the tea leaves. But in my experience, what it tells me is there was a great divide in that jury deliberation room. Of course, probably the greater amount leaning towards guilty and a smaller amount leaning towards not guilty. And over that time, there must have been some sort of conversation, some sort of evidence that one side was able to present to the other that pulled them all over to the side of guilty. And that's how we got that verdict after 4 days.
Alex, let's talk about Richard Allen. He made more than, 60 confessions while he was in prison to this crime, even confessing to his family. How did that have an impact on this outcome here?
Yeah, DeMarco, the prosecution leaned heavily on those jailhouse confessions, as you said, more than 60 of them. And you can't really underestimate the power that had in the courtroom. The jury was paying attention a lot during that testimony. They had a lot of questions when they heard that. They got to hear Richard Allen, in his own words, admit to the killings. The defense tried to say that those were false confessions. They said that he suffered from mental health issues that were made worse because he was being held in solitary confinement for more than a year. But clearly, the jury did not buy that argument.
Yeah, and Brian, the defense wasn't allowed to present certain evidence in this case. Walk us through that.
Yeah, so when you're talking about a homicide case, the obvious argument is not the people are not dead. The question is who done it, right? And so for a defense attorney, the ability to point to alternative suspects is the bread and butter to any homicide case. But in this case, the judge did not allow the defense to explore the idea that, one, the two girls were messaging someone who was catfishing them into a suspected sexual assault situation. That person is serving decades now for child pornography and child abuse cases. The man who owned the property where the bodies were found, he actually gave a lie as to where he was, and they were never able to point to that as a defense. Also, I think a lot of people who've been following the case, Odinism. The idea that these young girls were killed in some sort of ritualistic killing, those are not able to be presented. So when you're a defense attorney and you don't have the ability to say, well, that person could have done it, that person could have done it, that person could have done it, it really hinders a defense.
Alex, Allen will be back in court next month for sentencing. So walk us through this phase here.
Yeah, DeMarco, the sentencing is set for December 20th. He could face up to 130 years behind bars. And, we haven't heard much from the family throughout this process, as that is in part because of the gag order. But during that sentencing, we are expecting Abby and Libby's families will deliver victim impact statements. They'll tell the court just how much this tragedy has impacted their lives. And that's all information that the judge can use when she delivers her sentence.
And looking ahead, Brian, they are expected to appeal. What do you anticipate is going to happen here?
Yes, when it comes to appeals, probably the big three are either the defense attorney made a mistake, ineffective assistance of counsel, the prosecution made a mistake, or the judge made a mistake in allowing certain evidence to come in or not allowing evidence to come in. Those three alternative suspect theories that I mentioned earlier, those are probably going to be a big point of contention in this case for an appeal. And so for me, while I think most of the community here is looking at this as justice, I say this is just the first chapter. I think the sentence is going to come down, and then the appeal after appeal after appeal is going to occur. And the question becomes is this case going to get sent back to the trial court for a different trial, or will this be the final verdict?
And Alex, before you go, you've been talking to so many people in that community. What's their reaction to this verdict?
Well, DeMarco, I've been here since just hours after the girls' bodies were recovered back in 2017. We've been coming back and forth since then, talking to people who are here. And this community is invested in these families. They felt the pain, the loss of these girls. When that verdict was read yesterday, there was a group of people who had gathered here outside the courthouse, and they erupted in cheers after they learned that it was a guilty verdict. So people here have been following this very closely, and you talk to them and you ask them how they feel right now, and they say this verdict was not only about justice, but it's also about healing.
Yeah, that community. Alex Perez, thank you so much, Brian Buckmire, both of you. Good to have you with us today.